Happy Sunday, everyone. Let me know if you're on the replay, which is what I call leftovers. Please put a comment in the chat, in the comments. That would be awesome. That is a great way to help push out the show to more people and get it in front of more eyeballs. I hope you had a good 4th of July. I have had a great time on the road and went and saw some fireworks last night. Haven't done that in a number of years, and that was a lot of fun. Today we went to go see the movie Young Washington. Let me know in the comments if you have seen Young Washington. It is another production from Angel Studios. And definitely, I think probably the best one I've seen from them. I think that Angel Studios is really trying to build some kind of alternative infrastructure to Hollywood. It's trying to be an independent competitor to the Hollywood machine. So think what you will of Angel Studios. I do think that is their goal. It's an interesting goal to me as someone who has been adjacent to Hollywood for a few decades. So let me know in the chat if you have any thoughts about that. We can talk about that. Somebody says here that they really enjoyed the movie. They saw it. Yeah, it was good. The production value was good. The acting was good. The writing was good. The cinematography was good. The name of the movie is called Young Washington, and it's about George Washington in his younger years before the Declaration of Independence. Most of it is about how he ascended into the military during the French and Indian War, which is not really something that we talk a lot about in U.S. history, is the French and Indian War. It's kind of before the colonies. It's in the 1750s. But I don't know how much of the movie is really true, but it was some good storytelling, and it's not overly violent. Like, if you remember the movie Glory from the very early 90s, it's not as violent as that, although it does have a number of battle scenes, but there's not a lot of on-screen graphic stuff. If you've seen Lord of the Rings, it's kind of adjacent to that level. I think I would take maybe a 10 or 12-year-old, depending on their maturity, to it. There's a number of what I would call implied violence off screen. There is nothing that I can remember that is super gory, but good story about virtue, and it's kind of interesting movie. Young Washington is what it's called, and definitely worth the ticket. And if you want to support independent filmmaking, that's another reason to do it. So it is an Angel Studios production. So that was what we did today. So I was thinking about our opening hymn, and I know that many of you really like the hymns. So I'm going to play a special version of our opening hymn today. So here is one of my favorite hymns, What a Friend We Have in Jesus. But this version is from a very famous
All our sins and griefs are bad.
The one and only Aretha Franklin, ladies and gentlemen. Can you imagine, like, you show up for church and Aretha Franklin is the soloist? That's crazy to me. But yeah, that's a really great rendition of that old hymn. That's one of my all-time favorite hymns, and I love Miss Franklin's interpretation of it. Just so good. So put a comment in the chat what some of your favorite hymns are. I'd love some ideas, what you would like me to play. If you have a favorite rendition of it, let me know. You can always DM me, email me, and let me know. So love to keep those hymns going and get a lot of comments about the opening hymn. And so send me some ideas. All right, so I had a topic suggestion, and if you have a topic suggestion and you want me to talk about something, just put it in the chat, your questions on God, the Bible, and real life. Would love to dialogue about some things. I had somebody write in this week and make a suggestion for a topic. I thought, oh, it's kind of interesting. I think I could talk about that. And that is to talk about the issue of ecumenism. And I don't know if you've ever really thought about this, but something I've had to give a considerable amount of thought to, given our ministry and how many people that we partner with and platform. And I've kind of had to develop a framework of ecumenism, and just thinking about boundaries and when is ecumenism helpful, when is it not, when does it become compromising. And ecumenism is kind of this idea of cooperation, of how do we reach across the aisle, across denominations, to do anything from just have a conversation about our faith to maybe cooperating with one another in the public square, and even political engagement. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about ecumenism. And there's a few weeks ago that, me, I always like to talk about a good soap opera on X. So there was a soap opera on X about whether or not Mormonism is a Christian religion. And this congressman named Mike Lee, who goes by Based Mike Lee on X, and I'm going to show his little thing here so you can see it a little bit better. And again, he's a congressman, he's a patriot, and he wrote a post. Apparently, he's also a member of the Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And he wrote a post, can anyone tell me why the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints was left out of the list of Christian churches? And I thought, oh, what an interesting question. I remember, I think I was online pretty close to when this was posted, like within a few minutes after it was posted. And so if you look at it here, you can see all the different categories: agnostic, Baha'i, Buddhist. And then under Christian, there's all these different denominational categories: Assembly of God, Baptist, Brethren, Roman Catholic, Church of Christ, blah, blah, blah. There's even non-denominational, Orthodox. But notice this one, Christian - Jehovah's Witnesses. I'm like, what? Why are the Jehovah's Witnesses, why are the Watchtower people under Christian when the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints down here has its own category? And I thought, this is a little strange, because I would kind of put both of them as their own thing. And yet the military is not seeing them as both being their own thing. And they see the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints as a separate thing. But the Jehovah's Witnesses are a version of a Christian denomination. And I'm like, ugh, this is so confusing. Like, whoever made this list is highly confused. And so then there was this post that I saw, kind of explaining the context of things. The Office of the Secretary of War is announcing a significant change in the department's categorization of religious affiliation. So apparently, let me make this a different size. Apparently, they reduced the list from over 200 unmanageable categories to 31. And the original intent of collecting, they're returning to the original intent of collecting data to allow our chaplains and religious support personnel to provide the best spiritual care for our warfighters. And having these designations is a way for the military to deploy certain personnel in situations like, let's say a soldier is hospitalized with an injury and they want to send a person staffing from the chaplain's office. Well, they got to know what kind of chaplain to send. And so they have these categories to offer spiritual care for soldiers. And so that's why they have these designations. And I think that there's a good heart behind it, and they just felt like 200 was too many. So they were trying to whittle it down, to the biggest categories, and then they had other, So if you got some like very, very minor religion, you're an other. Okay. But another congressman, Mike Kennedy, spoke up, and he apparently is also a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And he was also upset about the list. And he says the Pentagon's decision to list the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints apart from other Christian faiths is wrong, needs to be corrected. No one needs to wonder where the members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints stand. We stand with Christ. We are Christians. And Latter-day Saints stand alongside many Christians of every tradition and following the teachings of Christ. We only ask to be accurately portrayed. I strongly urge the department to correct the record. Well, this led into quite a situation because the military is like now finding itself in a battle over defining who's a Christian. So the government is now getting in the business of how are we going to arbitrate who qualifies as a Christian. It kind of reminds me of ancient Rome, where there's one point in I think it's in the Gospels. It's either in the Gospels or Acts, where the governor in charge is like, I don't want to get into a debate about defining a Jew. It's like, I don't want to do that. But that's exactly where our government found itself all of a sudden because of this list. And I can admit, like, the designation of the Watchtower people as a Christian denomination, it is a little strange. But this really raises for me the concept and question of ecumenism and boundaries when it comes to religion, and when it can be good and when it can be not so good. For example, here in California, many years ago, like 15 to 20 years ago, there was a proposition on our ballot about defining marriage. And at that time, it passed, of defining marriage in the traditional biblical way. And evangelical organizations kind of partnered with Roman Catholics and the Mormons to push this ballot initiative and get it passed. And that would be a form of ecumenism, of public policy, standing in solidarity over things like traditional marriage, or abortion might be another issue where there could be some ecumenical spirit and sharing. But then when we get into Christian doctrine, that's kind of a different form of ecumenism. For example, at our ministry, at the Center for Biblical Unity, we are not a denominationally affiliated ministry. We are not an official Baptist ministry or an official Presbyterian or Lutheran ministry. We are an interdenominational Christian ministry. So we have an approach to ecumenism that is, let's rally around the core doctrines of the faith, such as the Nicene Creed, or we affirm here the Chicago Statement on Inerrancy, which was an interdenominational effort to define inerrancy back in the late 70s, early 1980s, or our Los Angeles Statement on Race, Justice, and Unity. That would be an example of interdenominational Christian ecumenism. And so we are defining the boundaries as historic Christians, okay? But part of that involves treating secondary and tertiary issues like they are actually secondary and tertiary issues. And so people come on our page from all different denominational perspectives. We have confessional Lutherans, and we have Reformed Baptists, and we have charismatics. And so right on our website, we have a number of position statements where we explain, we don't really take a firm position as a ministry about things like the age of the earth, or egalitarianism versus complementarianism, or whether we're more understanding the doctrines of grace or providence and predestination versus quote unquote free will, which is not really something I believe in, but we'll call it like moral agency. Is kind of my preferred term for that. So like, how do those things fit together? Like for us, we don't really take a position on these issues because we're an interdenominational ministry. And so we have an approach to cooperation and ecumenism of, hey, we stand with the Nicene Creed and the Chicago Statement on Inerrancy and the Nashville Statement on Sex and Gender, the Los Angeles Statement on Race, Justice, and Unity. These are kind of where we are, but we treat these secondary issues as issues within our ministry that we can have differences of opinion. Now, Monique and I are often very transparent about what our personal views are, but our ministry doesn't take an official position on Calvinism, for example. So I think that it's an important thing to understand, what it is that we're doing, what it is that other ministries are doing, and then how do what I call denominational distinctives fit into that. There's a question here. I'm always confused by the concept of core Christian doctrine because it always seems to leave out the gospel message. I think that's an interesting point. I think that, the Nicene Creed is just the standard definition of what it means to be a historic Christian. And I would say the gospel is part of that. Part of it depends on how you're defining the gospel. The gospel is, according to 1 Corinthians 15, the life, burial, resurrection, and ascension of Jesus, that the Messiah has come. Well, that is the core foundation of the Nicene Creed. So when I say core Christian doctrine, that is what I'm talking about. So when does ecumenism, so we promote at the ministry a version of ecumenism that is acknowledges like that there are core doctrines that unite Christians, but that then there are secondary issues, what I call denominational distinctives. So if you want to know more about kind of our approach to all of these things, if you just go on the centerforbiblicalunity.com page and you go under the About and go to what we believe, you can see all of our beliefs. I'm very transparent in what I've written here, our statement of faith, and then our position statements on the things that we hold to and where we stand. And then you can also go on the Issues tab and scroll down for a short article on our approach to ecumenism. So sometimes we get questions about this at the ministry, so I just want you to know there are answers available. So now, when does ecumenism become bad? Like, when does it become really dangerous? Well, that's when you don't know where the actual boundaries are. Like when we start talking about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and whether they are Christians, okay? This is then we're talking about how are we defining our boundaries. And I have a fair amount of experience in talking to a very devoted and informed member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints about these issues. And we have had a lot of back and forth about this topic. And in the beginning, he would tell me, that we're both Christian, we're the same. And he would probably still say that. But over time, I was able to kind of make the point that our definition of Christianity is the Nicene Creed. He's defining Christianity differently. It is a different set of beliefs, okay? And so he asked me one time, like, why do so many Christians who are in your camp get so upset with us as the members of the LDS Church? Why do you guys get so upset with us that we call ourselves Christians? And I was trying to explain to him, I said, it's because your guy, Joseph Smith, threw all of us out. He anathematized all of us. He told us like that we had lost the faith, that the faith had been so apostatized that for 1800 years, it essentially didn't exist until Joseph Smith came along. And so there's this, I think, confusion over terms because LDS members want to call themselves Christians, but then they want to define all of the terms. And that's like saying, I'm a vegetarian who eats meat. Well, no, words mean things. And if you're a vegetarian, that means by definition, you don't eat meat. And so if you call yourself a Christian, but then you want to redefine all the core doctrine or a lot of the core doctrines, that's not how that works. Like, we as historic Christians are defining our faith a certain kind of a way. And I always use the Nicene Creed and its Trinitarian framework as a definition of what does it mean to be a Christian. But right here on the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints official website, so this isn't like some heresy hunter site or some person's personal webpage. This is the official newsroom of the LDS Church, okay? And there's an article called Core Beliefs that lists a bunch of different beliefs that they want to redefine, and that they are a restoration, their goal is restoration. And it began in the 1800s, that essentially apostolic authority was lost for 1800 years. And so then they want to redefine the Trinity. They want to redefine prophets. They want to redefine the plan of salvation. They want to redefine the eternal state. They want to redefine the purpose of temples. They want to redefine a lot of things about our faith. And this is why we get frustrated. This is because we feel like, wait, your guy threw us out. Joseph Smith says in the very beginning of the Book of Mormon that all of the other churches were apostate. He asked God which one he should join. They are all apostate. And so his is a restoration movement. But then you want to redefine all your terms. That's vegetarians who eat meat. You don't get to redefine our faith. Now you can call it something else, and that's fine. You can do that. But you don't get to tell us what you think our faith should be. And so if you're a well-intentioned, good faith Mormon, and you want to understand why historic Christians get so frustrated and angry with you and say you're in a cult, you have to understand this point. And I mean that with all sincerity. Like, you have to understand you have a different definition of the Trinity. You have a different definition of Jesus. You have a different definition of the eternal state. You have a different definition of the primordial state. You have redefined the faith, but you still want to call it Christianity. Similar error with progressive Christians. Progressive Christians want to call themselves Christians, but then they want to redefine the faith. There again, progressive Christians are vegetarians who want to eat meat. If you're eating meat, you are not a vegetarian. Definitions matter. So this is when ecumenism becomes very confusing. When we don't have proper definitions and boundaries, and we don't really know where the lines are. Another very confusing form of ecumenism is interfaith situations. This line that Muslims, Jews, and Christians all believe in the same God. And they all they all trace their line back to Abraham. These talking points are not in reality. Like, we do not believe in the same God. Just because there's two guys named Bob in the room doesn't mean that they're the same person. And so just because this is what we're talking about, the name God, doesn't mean it's the same person. So anyways, those are some thoughts about ecumenism. Again, you can go on our websites and check out more of our positions. I encourage you, go check out the Los Angeles Statement on Race, Justice, and Unity. It is our effort to try to help define issues related to race, racism, culture, ethnicity, and justice from a historic Christian perspective. What have Christians always believed about these issues? And it is a very interdenominational approach to the question. So I wanted to, in the second segment tonight, talk about what I see as the critical thing that you should be looking for if you are looking for a church. What do I think is the most important thing to look for? I take the very unpopular opinion that the quality of elders and your elder team is arguably the most important component of selecting a church. Now, why do I say this? Someday, you are going to walk through hard times. Someday, you might be faced with a prodigal child, or a troubled teen, or a difficult marriage. And you will need godly counsel, wisdom, and support. Where are you going to go for that? Hopefully, if you've selected a good church, you feel confident to go to the elders because you're already known by them. And they can be a legitimate support to you in that season. If you're not known by them, then you're in a crisis triage situation where you're trying to do two things at once. You're trying to simultaneously get to know your pastor and deal with the crisis in front of you in your home. But the time to ideally do that is before you get to the crisis. And to think about and look and investigate the quality of your elder team. This is the most important thing. Now, somebody says the most important thing is sound doctrine. I think sound doctrine is important. It's very important. But if you don't have the leadership in place, and I'm going to talk about this in a minute, your church on paper can have all the sound doctrine in the world, but if you don't have the right leadership, it doesn't matter. It literally doesn't matter. So this is even, I would say, it is deeply connected to the sound doctrine. But if you don't have the process and the personnel in place, having a nice doctrinal statement on your website is not going to help you in a time of need. It is not going to help preserve you when that sound doctrine needs to be applied to your situation. So what does an elder do? An elder is an overseer. They provide spiritual and material leadership to the local church. And what I mean by material leadership is they're helping with stewardship like finances, land management, making sure that the taxes are compliant, and providing spiritual oversight to the people. Now, immediately there's going to be a problem if you're in a megachurch. Like, I don't know how that works, to be honest. I know people are like, well, I'm in a small group, but how trained is your small group leader? Because I don't know where you guys go to church, but when I've been in situations in a local church, a lot of times the criteria for a small group leader when they're recruiting them is, hey, can you play a video? Can you facilitate a conversation? And if this is the group where you're taking your concerns, it's like, how do you know what the quality is of the people who are going to be giving you the advice? And so we need shepherding, and you need to be known by your leadership, and you need to, having a good elder stands at the intersection of being qualified and available. Like, not all elders are not all men are qualified to be elders, but not all men who are qualified are available. Some of them are overcommitted. Some of them are going to have to give up some commitments in order to serve the people of God. And so it's a tough balance there. So tonight I want to talk about 10 kinds of men who should not be serving as elders. 10 kinds of men who are not qualified. Because I think that this goes to why so many of our churches are sick. Like, why do we keep having these problems where people get church hurt, or where pastors are falling and in such public ways? I think it's because, in part, I think a big piece of the puzzle is that we put men in leadership who are not biblically qualified. Jamie's asking, what is the ideal size of the church? Well, I think the ideal size is however many elders you have that can reasonably shepherd your people. So if you've got 1,000-member church, I hope you have 20 elders who can reasonably start discipling. Because even if you have 20 elders in a 1,000-member church, they're going to be overseeing 50 people each. That's a big ask. Like, I think so much of it depends on how many people can you reasonably shepherd? How many people can you reasonably know and be able to walk in life with? Because sooner or later, there will be a crisis in your life. And so many times I get stories, people write to me, are like, my elders didn't do anything. My pastors didn't do anything. Well, how well did you know them? How much investment had you made in really knowing them and being known by them? So when the emergency came, they were ready. They helped you see the emergency 20 miles ahead. Like, they've been in a life situation with you. They already knew, like, oh, there's a growing problem with this couple's child, or this couple is in a very difficult marriage. But so often, like, we just simply are not known. And then we go to our elders and we get all this church hurt because they didn't do anything to help me. I was totally on my own. Well, my question is what have you done to be known? And how carefully did you vet them before you really made the investment of being there? So I want to talk about 10 kinds of men who should not be elders, okay? And so we're going to look at scripture together. We're going to look at what the Bible has to say in some key ways. So let's start off with 1 Timothy chapter 3. It's a good go-to verse. Here's a trustworthy saying: whoever aspires to be an overseer desires a noble task. Now the overseer is to be above reproach, faithful to his wife, temperate, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not given to drunkenness, not violent, but gentle, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money. He must manage his own family well and see that his children obey him, and he must do so in a manner worthy of full respect. Verse 6, he must not be a recent convert, and he must also have a good reputation with outsiders. Now notice the qualifications for deacons that immediately follow that. He must not be pursuing dishonest gain. And the women, which either can be wives or female deaconesses, the historic tradition has been female deaconesses, but I'll leave that to the side for now. Either one, the wives of the deacons or deaconesses must be worthy of respect and not malicious talkers. In other words, they're not gossip, but temperate and trustworthy in everything. And so what do we notice right away is we notice that there's positive traits and there's negative traits, okay? And so if we want to know why our churches are sick, why we have so much church hurt and offense, and we feel so lonely and we're struggling, I think it's because we're not reading these verses. We're not putting the leadership in its proper place that are biblically qualified. We are sometimes putting men in place that are in the knots. Okay, so let's look at this list. Not a drunkard. Okay, it means he's not an addict to alcohol or any other addicting abuses. I don't think God's just limiting to alcohol. I think this is a broader principle in play here, that is not a drunkard. He's not addicted. Okay. He has not surrendered a control of his life to some kind of substance, overusing it, or eventually becoming dependent on it. And when this drunkard quality is combined with some of these other qualities that we're going to talk about, it's a mess. This is a recipe for catastrophe, because he's addicted, but he still considers himself suited to ministry. So he has a unrepentant, chronic, habitual sin. Okay, so I'm trying to unpack each of these and how this shows up in the real world. Violent. He's not violent. Well, let's talk about that. What does that mean? This is like, it contrasts violent with being gentle. This is the domineering man. He's a bully. He's abusive. In order to get his way, he will use force and coercion if necessary. And this could be done, like maybe he's just got like a really strong coercive personality. Everyone's afraid to confront him. He's domineering. He uses the strength of his position to coerce people to do his will. He might even coerce them physically. Okay. So this is what this is talking about. Imagine being a drunkard and combining that with domineering and violent. That would be a problem. Okay. He's not quarrelsome. He's not quick-tempered. He doesn't have a hot temper. These are the people that are chronically divisive, and nobody wants to cross him. All right. He just kind of lives in his emotions. He's always riled up, and he refuses to exhibit any kind of mastery over his anger. And instead of leading in love and gentleness and being respected in his community, he leads through fear. And when people get in his way, he just kind of explodes. He justifies his anger, tells people they must respect him, and he's got a lot of ambition in an ungodly way. And pair that with addiction, quarrelsome and addicted. That's a mess. He's not greedy. These are the people that demand an exorbitant salary, and then they hop from church to church. Maybe they're trying to climb some financial ladder. These are the kind of ministers that they don't look at the people as like people, God's sheep who need a shepherd and they need love, and he's been entrusted with their care. This is the kind of guy that looks at pastoring as a way of enriching himself. He loves his paycheck more than the people of God. And remember we saw in the qualifications for deacons, similar, dishonest gain. He engages in shady business practices, or he isn't working at all. He's just mooching off others, mooching off the church. Okay. Another kind of man that should not be an elder is someone who's arrogant and overbearing. This is from the Titus chapter 1 passage. An elder must be blameless, faithful to his wife. This is all kind of a repeat from 1 Timothy 3. A man whose children believe and are not open to the charge of being wild and disobedient. He's an overseer. He manages God's house. He must be blameless, not overbearing, not quick-tempered, not given to drunkenness, not violent, not pursuing dishonest gain. He loves what is good. He's hospitable, self-controlled, upright, holy, and disciplined. He holds firmly to the trustworthy message as it has been taught, so that he can encourage others by sound doctrine and refute those who oppose it. So if we're going to talk about men who are not qualified to be in ministry, we've talked about not a drunkard. He's not addicted to something. Not someone who's violent, someone who's domineering, somebody who's greedy, somebody who's arrogant and overbearing. A recent convert should not be an elder in a church. They lack spiritual maturity. They need time to grow. There's nothing wrong with being a recent convert. They just shouldn't be vaulted into ministry. Newly saved men are prone to deceit and foolish decision-making, according to the Apostle Paul. We also don't want a chronic womanizer. We want the husband of one wife. So it can't be a polygamous man, and it can't be a chronic adulterer. It needs to be somebody who has demonstrated a life pattern of being consistent and faithful. Next is somebody who is doctrinally unstable. This is the person who is either not just the person who's teaching heresy, although that is a problem. Like, we can't have leaders teaching heresy. But in this day and age, I'm also worried about the men who are easily swayed. They are easily swayed by popular culture, theological fads, and they lack sophistication about the complexities of doctrine. An elder is someone who must hold firm to the trustworthy message as it has been taught to him. Those who lack doctrinal knowledge and integrity, or cave to cultural pressure or compromise, will undermine the spiritual foundation of the whole congregation. It can't just be the lead pastor. He knows the doctrine. No, it has to be the whole team. That there's been an effort to vet qualified men, and part of having a qualified man is somebody who is not doctrinally unstable, and that he knows how to stand up for sound doctrine, teach sound doctrine, and he knows the difference between Black Lives Matter and sound doctrine, okay? He can evaluate a cultural trend and in light of the Bible. Finally, number 10 is we should not have men in eldership who are passive. This is kind of the absentee leader. This is the guy who just kind of leaves all the decisions to the other guys or to the head pastor. God's design in the local church is for a plurality of leadership. This isn't about efficiency. Having a singular leader is much more efficient. God's plan is about wisdom and accountability and protection for God's people. Passive leaders are those who avoid doing tough church discipline, and they shy away from theological protection of the flock and leaving Jesus' sheep open and vulnerable to wolves. Let's look at Paul's statements in Acts chapter 20. It's so good. He tells the leaders, he tells the Ephesian elders, this is what it is, to keep watch over yourselves and all the flock of which the Holy Spirit has made you overseers. Be shepherds. He wants them to be shepherds. They're not ruling over the people. They're shepherding them of the church of God, which he has bought with his own blood. In other words, these people don't belong to you. You're not a king and you're ruling over them. Like, that's not what this is. I know after I leave, savage wolves will come in among you and will not spare the flock. Even from your own number, men will rise and distort the truth in order to draw away disciples after them. So be on your guard. Remember that for 3 years, I never stopped warning each of you night and day with tears. Paul knows people are going to come in with unsound doctrine. They're going to come in with morally corrupt lives and try to pluck people off, okay? He knows that that's what's going to happen. But the passive leader, the absentee leader, is the kind of leader who just wants to go along to get along and lets it happen. So these are 10 kinds of men. So remember, being a man does not make you qualified to be an elder. It just doesn't. Most men are not qualified to be elders. It's a small section of men who will be elders because they're qualified and they're available. All right. So when we look at these traits, though, what I want you to notice is that when we go back to my original question of like, what's wrong with the churches today? Well, the foundation of it, I think, so much of the time is we recruit men who look like this. We recruit men who do not have good character. It's a much bigger problem than they don't have sound doctrine. Much bigger than that. It's they have ungodly character. It's a both and. And then we wonder about like, well, when I went to my pastor and my elder team, they didn't seem to care. Okay, well, were they biblically qualified? Or did we just pick prominent men from the community? Did we pick good business people? Did we pick a lawyer? Did we pick somebody who's a medical doctor? Did we pick a psychologist because he's prominent in the community? Did we pick somebody because they're a certain ethnicity? None of these things make somebody biblically qualified. God literally doesn't care if you are a butcher, a baker, or a candlestick maker. He doesn't care. What he cares about is that you have godly quality and you know sound doctrine and you can teach sound doctrine and you can throw wolves out. So you have a spine. You're not like the wet noodle spine of I'm so winsome that I let wolves into where the sheep are. That is godly leadership. So when we think about what is wrong in our churches today, in so many of our churches, I think it's because we have unsound foundations. On paper, we have good doctrine, but we don't have the personnel in place who are biblically qualified. And so then we wonder when we're going through a life crisis, why I'm not getting proper help. And then what happens? So many times the shepherding is handed off to a therapist. We can't walk this road with you. Your needs are too great. Here's a therapist. Now, sometimes the needs are great, but can it be a both and? Like if your pastor is not interested in knowing you, or you don't have an elder that you can call and who's walking a road with you, like I have to give you some hard news as a sister in the Lord. That's not healthy. It's not sustainable. You need somebody who is going to walk a road with you during hard times. Somebody who has godly counsel that you can trust. But the only way you can know that before the crisis is if you've actually had some conversations and you've walked a road with the person. If you're in a megachurch situation and you're just counting on your small group leader, who knows if they're biblically qualified? Now, here's something I'm going to say, kind of unusual. I think every member of your church staff should be elder qualified or deacon qualified. Every member that is in a ministry or pastoral position, women's minister, like all this stuff, needs to be at least elder or deacon qualified. Not because they are going to be elders or deacons per se, but they should be spiritually mature people who have godly character and can discern sound doctrine and throw out wolves. Now, we can assume that we think our leaders have this, but then we go and we have a conversation with them. We're like, now, wait a minute. What's happening right now? Like, I'm in an abusive marriage and this elder doesn't know me and he's coming into this conversation cold, and I've got to try to catch him up on 20 years of behavior, and then he's got to try to discern what's happening. That all takes time. And when we're in that situation, then the pastor might be meeting us for the first time, and now he's in a triage situation. He's in a position where he's trying to get to know you, and he's trying to discern this very complicated dynamic in your marriage or with your prodigal child or whatever the emergency situation may be. The primary duty of the elder, again, is to actively shepherd. It is to protect. It is to oversee the church's health, spiritual health, financial health. And yet it is in today's church culture, especially in low church evangelical Protestant churches, it is alarmingly easy to become to have the elder team just basically become like a corporate board where all they're doing is talking about budgets and buildings and new carpet and business decisions, practical matters that do need attention. But none of these things should overshadow the main responsibility of shepherding God's people and helping them grow in their spiritual health and their spiritual knowledge, their doctrinal knowledge of the faith, training them. If we could just start recruiting people based on biblical standards, I think the health of our churches would improve. But because we have this model in a lot of Protestant churches of self-appointment, oh, I have a call to ministry. Oh, I'm going to enroll in seminary. Oh, now I need a job. And we go to Indeed. Like, we have adopted a completely worldly mindset. And then we wonder why our churches are sick and why people have so much church hurt and why things don't work. Well, it's because we jettisoned the foundation and we're just not even doing this in a way that's biblical. Like, should we be shocked at the fruit? Instead of recruiting from within, people that we know, watching people grow in their servanthood in the local church, helping them grow in their leadership abilities, giving them incrementally more and more responsibility, helping to train them, disciple them, with older men discipling younger men, and in the women, and all of that. But then when we don't do it in the biblical way, then we wonder, well, why? How did everything get so broken? Why do I say that elders are the most important component of a local church? And how does this connect to walking through hard times? Good preaching, sound worship, good Bible studies, small groups, all that stuff is good. Kids ministry, all of it's good. But walking you through difficult seasons and guarding the flock against wolves and bad teaching is what elders do. And if you don't have that leadership in place, it will not work. And when we hand over our shepherding to therapists and the world, it's not going to turn out the way that God intended. We need elders who can preserve sound doctrine, but who can also help us to adjudicate the truth in complicated situations, particularly in marriages, but other conflicts as well. I want to talk more about that issue on a future live stream. But my bottom line takeaway for tonight is hire elders that are biblically qualified, or not hire them, but recruit elders that are biblically qualified. Make sure that they are good and godly and discerning men, that they are trustworthy. Get to know your elders sooner than later. Don't wait until there's a crisis in your life. Know that you can get the support that you are going to need when it really matters. This is bringing up so much. My ex-husband was the elder of our church. That would be tough. At that time, I thought it was good. Now I look back and I can clearly see how he was the opposite of all of this. Yeah. And I think that the health of our churches is a direct reflection of the spiritual maturity of our elders. And if you have a bunch of yes men on your elder team that are basically just there to rubber stamp the lead pastor, your church is in trouble. It's in trouble. That's not their job. That's not the biblical model. If you have elders on your elder team that have one of these 10 characteristics that is ministry disqualifying, you're in trouble. If you have a hesitancy about going to a pastor and you're like, oh, they're narcissists, there's other people on the staff that know that that person's a narcissist. It's just the elders are too passive to fire the person. That's the problem. Your church is in trouble. Yep. Natalie, you're right on the money. Pastors are hired because they are good speakers and charismatic, more than the list you provided. This is my problem. And this is why our churches are sick. This is why people have church trauma. It's because we have unqualified people in leadership. And so many of our churches do not have a meaningful path to training and bringing up leaders from within. So there is a stream or a stable of qualified men, so that when one man needs to rotate off, there's someone who is qualified who can rotate on, and people have breaks and all of that. We very few churches have a training mechanism to raise men up in sound doctrine, and we have this completely broken model where people self-appoint. And then we wonder why we have broken churches and broken people and narcissistic pastors. The self-call is, that's just not how that works. It is not the biblical rule. I hope you found this discussion helpful. I know it was kind of a couple of heavy topics, but I felt like they were important topics. And feel free to send me ideas if you have ideas for topics that you would like me to cover. And again, I want to urge you, if you want more of like the technical details and teaching, go to my YouTube channel, click on the Church Life playlist, and you'll see all of my teachings related to these issues there with all the details and in-depth stuff. This was kind of just me free-flowing on a topic that I've taught on before. But I would really like to, when I get back to the podcast, maybe later in the year, I want to do a podcast or two about deacons. It's something I haven't really talked about on the show, and do some biblical teaching on deacons and what I see their role as, and continue to try to build clarity around church leadership. I hope this conversation also encourages you to think about your own local church, and that going to your church and hearing sound teaching is not enough. And I hear so many people on our page say, oh, I love my church. The pastor's very sound. Well, that's great. I'm glad he's sound. I don't want him to be a heretic. But just because somebody's a good speaker or teaches sound doctrine doesn't mean they have godly character. And trust me, you are going to need that person's wise counsel and godly counsel someday. Even if that day is not today, you will need that person at some point. And you don't want to be finding that out, that this person, what this person is really like in real life, when you're in the throes of a crisis. The time to find that out is much earlier. So I hope this conversation will cause you to reflect a bit about that. All right, friends, thanks for watching. Please comment, even if you're watching on the next day on the replay. And I would encourage you to share this with some friends. And I look forward to your feedback. And again, if you have topic ideas, feel free to send them my way if you'd like me to cover something. And with that, I will say grace and peace.